When you take a look at what is happening in the Middle East, sometimes one would be compelled to ask, what is the end game here? What is Trump really after? Well, I have a theory. Now, before you go ahead and try to condemn me, I said it's a theory. So just let me land. Now, let's take a look at what Trump has actually been doing in recent times based on evidence. Recent developments show some clear patterns. For starters, he's aggressively targeting Venezuela's oil sector. He's escalating tensions in the Middle East, especially in Iran. He's openly promoting U.S. oil exports as an alternative. Aha! For example, during the Iran crisis, he explicitly framed disruption in the Middle East as an opportunity for the U.S. in terms of oil. Did you hear that? An opportunity for U.S. oil. The U.S. is pushing countries to buy American oil instead of Middle Eastern supply. About 20% of global oil exports flow through the Strait of Hormuz, as we all know, so disrupting it reshapes the market. Now, at the same time, the US has moved to control or heavily influence Venezuelan oil flows. Now, there are efforts to open Venezuela to foreign companies, including US companies. So, yes, there's a shift towards the Western Hemisphere and US aligned supply. But is this really a grand move, as in move oil out of the Middle East master plan? Let's look at the theory a bit more closely. Now, there's no strong evidence of a coordinated global relocation strategy as such, but instead, what experts consistently point to is price control and political leverage. Trump's long standing goal is to lower oil prices for voters and the US economy. Controlling Venezuelan supply helps influence global prices. Increasing US production strengthens that control. Energy independence, freedom to act aggressively because the US now produces a lot of oil. You see what the game is? Then, as a result of that, it can sanction or destabilize other producers without hurting itself as much. Now, there's a huge shift from the past, if you ask me. Venezuela is not just about oil, it's also about who controls it. China has been a major buyer of Venezuelan oil, and US involvement helps cut China out of that supply chain. Even experts have said that Venezuela's plan looks improvised. That's the plan to take it there. Looks improvised. The strategy beyond control the oil is not very clear, and it's being freestyled. It's evolving as we go along. Now, what about Africa? Hmm. Africa is becoming more important. We have Nigeria, Angola, but there's no clear push specifically redirecting global oil towards Africa. It's more of a market driven diversification, not a central pillar of his policy, at least not publicly. So, um, it might be right to say that there's a shift towards US and the Western Hemisphere using crisis to redirect demand for oil and of course, using it as a geopolitical weapon. However, there's no clear proof of a coordinated plan to replace the Middle East because it is still too dominant to sideline so quickly. And the policies don't look planned. Like I said, it looks more freestyled and improvised than some kind of master plan. So Trump isn't trying to replace the Middle East oil. He's trying to reduce dependence on it, gain leverage over global supply, and position the US plus friendly regions to them like Venezuela as a dominant alternative while using disruption as a tool. So instead of a clean end game, what we're seeing is energy dominance mixed with geopolitical opportunism, powered by the fact that the US no longer needs Middle Eastern oil the way they used to. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Let's talk about how Nigeria's position in this whole thing. Now, Nigeria is sitting on what you might call a quiet advantage. It's one of the largest oil producers in Africa, produces sweet crude, which has low sulfur and is easier to refine, so it's cheaper to get out of the ground. And it already exports heavily to Europe and Asia. Now, if the world starts hedging against Middle East instability, Nigeria becomes, first of all, a backup supply, and of course, a diversification option, and also a strategic bargaining chip. If Trump's strategy plays out, like I think it might, Nigeria benefits. But let's look at how we could benefit. Now, if Middle East supply becomes unstable, Venezuela is now brought back under Western influence, the US increases production, then global buyers, especially Europe, will still want multiple sources. And that is where Nigeria can step in. Now, the likely outcome is, first of all, an increased demand for Nigerian crude, especially from Europe, which is trying to avoid overdependence from any particular region. We already saw something similar after the Russia Ukraine crisis. Of course, Nigeria becomes more important in energy diplomacy, more deals. Of course, it could also lead to more pressure. And then it could also lead to higher revenue potential. If prices spike due to instability, Nigeria earns more, but this depends on actually producing and exporting efficiently. Now, there's some problems that might cause Nigeria to miss the opportunity. Now, here's the truth, even though it's a bit uncomfortable. Nigeria's biggest threat is not Trump's strategy, it's Nigeria itself. It's from within. There are key issues like oil theft and pipeline vandalism, massive losses daily, which undermine credibility as a reliable supplier. There's also underproduction. Nigeria often fails to meet OPEC quotas. There's also refining weakness. We still export crude, we import fuel, and that's a strategic disadvantage. There's also policy instability. As you well know, investors don't like uncertainty, and capital flows to more stable environments. And if you can't promise that, then it'll go elsewhere. The big power game is who controls Nigeria's oil? Now, this is where the theory gets deeper. Nigeria, of course, doesn't operate in a vacuum. There are competing interests. The United States wants alternative supply sources. China is heavily invested in African energy. Europe is desperate to diversify energy imports. Nigeria could become a contested space, not just a beneficiary. Now, the risk is this. There's a darker angle to this because it could lead to more exploitation. Now, if global powers shift focus to Africa, it could mean more foreign involvement in oil infrastructure, more influence over policy decisions, more interference, should I say. And of course, that has the potential for loss of control without real local benefit, as we have seen. In other words, Nigeria could gain importance but still lose control. Now, the real strategic question here is Nigeria has a choice. Number one, to be a passive player, sell crude, react to global prices, and stay vulnerable. And the second option would be strategic power, fix your production, expand refining, and, of course, negotiate from a position of strength. Which way, Nigeria? The global oil shift isn't just about moving away from the Middle East. It's about creating a multipolar energy map where countries like Nigeria become critical swing suppliers. But whether Nigeria wins depends entirely on internal capacity and control. So, the question is Nigeria about to become the world's backup oil power? Or is global oil shifting? And will Nigeria benefit, or will we be used again? That's the big question. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.